Welcome to The Bigger Game, where we talk about what really matters in living with purpose. I'm your host, Abiza Rashid. Let's dive into bold conversation, life experiences, and go from stuck to unstoppable. Welcome to this edition of The Bigger Game with Todd Palmer, CEO of Extraordinary Advisors and award-winning author, right? Bestseller on Amazon, From Stuck to Success. Welcome, Todd. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule in life to be with us today and kind of share some of your insights and nuggets.
Sure.
You're on The Bigger Game. So, let's just cut to the chase. What does a bigger game mean to you?
For me, the bigger game, it really comes down to how can I live my purpose every day? And my purpose is about being of service to others by improving lives. So I was blessed long time ago. I met a guy named Simon Sinek, and I got a chance to work with him for a couple of years to help me figure out what my purpose in life is. My why is improve lives, which I can do anywhere, at any time, with anyone, for a fee or for free. So I'm hoping today, by being here, that I'm able to live that purpose, live that why, and help you and the people watching.
That's extraordinary. Thanks for being here. Extraordinary Advisors. I look like I rolled that right. Look at that.
There you go. This is not your first time.
Not my first rodeo. Yeah. So, tell us about that journey, right? This whole thing about being uncomfortable, I think it's something you talk about quite a bit. Share us a little bit about that.
Well, I talk about being uncomfortable because I was uncomfortable for a long time. If you check out the book From Stuck to Success, I talk about the choices and decisions I made as an entrepreneur and how at one point they served me really well, and then till a point where they didn't serve me really well, and I got very uncomfortable. So much so to the point where I became $600,000 in debt. I was 60 days away from running out of all of my money, and the bank was threatening to take my house, and my son and I were going to be homeless at the time. From there, I got out of my own head, got out of my own way, and for the first time as an entrepreneur back in 2006, I reached out and hired a coach. And that coach helped me figure out that I'm both the cause of and the solution to all of my problems, because I was really good at saying, well, it's the bank, it's the economy, it's the customers, it's my employees. No, it was me. I picked the employees. I chose the bank. I selected the clients. I picked the industry. I picked the niche. It's me, not them. From there, we got very, very, very uncomfortable to the point of, September 9th of 2006, I walked in and fired my entire company and started over. Decided not to go down the route of taking the bankruptcy piece, because it was certainly a viable option to turn that company around. And we grew that business to the point of making it to the Inc. 5,000 6 times in 7 years. From there, you think, oh, you should be feeling pretty comfortable. You should be feeling pretty good. And at that point, I decided I wasn't super fulfilled. I wasn't living my life on a purpose-driven plane. And so I hired a different coach, a guy named Dr. Danny Friedland, who wrote a great book called Leading Well from Within. You can't lead others until you can first lead yourself. And he helped me really, with the work from Sinek, figure out what my purpose is. How can I mirror my definition of my why with my definition of my personal value of what success looks like, create that space between the zone of genius. And if I can live there every day by being of service to others through my coaching platform, through the books I write, I am going to be living my very best life.
So the secret to life is being uncomfortable. I think we solved it.
And so in the brain science, what I learned from Dr. Friedland is, we do get, the only place you grow is in the discomfort. If you do something once and it works, well, you learn you did it once and it works. It's when we talk about the phraseology, fail forward into success. For me, I was really good at telling myself what a failure I was. I had a bank statement that said I owed a bunch of money. I had a bank calling me all the time saying, hey, you owe us this, and mistakes I made, choices I made. What Dr. Friedland taught me is, you know what? Failure actually doesn't exist. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, failure is a man-made word. If you replace the word fail with the word learn, that's actually how you grow. And you only learn by making mistakes. You try something, it doesn't work. You try something and it's got 10 steps. 7 steps work, 3 steps don't. All right, so you learn 7 things that work, 3, and you learn through the other 3 things. But when we become, paralyzed, I call it the itty bitty shitty committee, how we talk to ourselves. If we become paralyzed by that, we live in fear, fight, and fear, we then don't move forward and get rid of the discomfort. Now, the crazy thing about discomfort is in the brain, discomfort is designed to keep you safe in many respects. What I mean by that is, it's called the comfort of the discomfort. Abizer, you come to me and say, hey, Todd, I want you to coach me. I want to grow and evolve. Awesome. You're going to fight me almost every step of the way because that growth is a threat to pride and ego, a threat to your safety in your brain because the things you did at one point that kept you safe no longer keep you safe. But your brain doesn't understand the difference and it wants to keep you safe. And in keeping you safe, it thinks it's doing the right things. So it creates this thing called the comfort of the discomfort. So you have to recognize that and then you have to overcome that.
Yeah, exactly the opposite, right? We get to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Right?
Well, you just accept it's going to happen.
That's the road. You talked about being at the cusp of 60 days and being on the street, and that being the impetus to taking on being uncomfortable. I think there's a few nuggets in there that we could probably really benefit from about what it takes to actually make that. I mean, it came down to the end of the road, right? We had to do something, and that was it. But there's probably more to it than that. Maybe you can share a little about that journey.
If you think about it, it really comes down to picking your hard. I can go through the hard of filing for bankruptcy. That's pretty hard. I can go through the hard of digging out and turning this business around. Both are hard. Both are uncomfortable. It's kind of like if you wanted to lose weight, you can have the hard of being overweight or the hard of diet and exercise. Pick your hard. They're all hard. There's still discomfort. Yeah, life's
so it's like water flows downhill.
Yeah, it's like this is how it goes.
You pick the lesser one. Yeah, and that brings up the other, another good point that life by itself is not hard or easy. It's really what I say about life, right, or about that situation or that person or that thing or whatever it might be, right? It's what I say about it, how I relate to it versus the thing itself. Speak to that for a minute. I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Well, it's just the perspective. You could, you and I could go to the gym and I could say, oh, I'm going to do these weights. You're going to say, ooh, that's uncomfortable. That's too hard. And you say, but I'm going to go run 10 miles. Ooh, that's uncomfortable. That's too hard. Well, it's just the perspective versus, I talk about it in the book. It's called the active learning cycle. And, you take a look at the issue. My issue was I'm $600,000 in debt. My intention, not my expectation, which puts me into my prefrontal cortex, was I want to get out of debt one day. So I'm going to try and create a strategy against that intention. So my strategy, I'm going to go after this channel or go after this channel, and then I'm going to get feedback. And I continually iteratively loop through that. When I iteratively loop through that, I'm continuing to make progress against the goal. And when I make progress against the goal, it's only enjoyable almost on the look back period. It's the hero's journey, right? Going, wow, look at how far I've come. That for me is the thing that seems to really help people figure out how to work through the hard.
So it's focusing. We always hear about this, right? Focusing on what we have versus what we don't have. Focus, how much do we spend our lives focusing on the gap, right? The part that we don't have. Spend much time dealing with that, and so much little mind share on celebrating what we've already accomplished. That's a great point.
Well, I don't think in at least in the Western society, we're taught to be humble. We're not taught to celebrate our successes. And where can you go to celebrate your successes? You can go to like an EO forum and talk about it there. You go to a mastermind group. You can have a friend or a coach talk it through. But the world, we live in a world where all we do is talk about woe is me. I didn't get my way. Life is hard. Dog ate my homework. Bank tried to take my house. But there's those things. Versus, it's the perspective you take. What I learned from Dr. Friedland is if we can embrace everything that happens to you happens for you, not to you. You actually use a different part of your brain. Dr. Friedland, passed away a few years ago, and he called it transitioning he had stage 4 brain cancer. And as he was transitioning, he would often tell me that cancer happened for him, not to him. Most of us, me included at the time, like, oh my God, woe is me. What, I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at the world. I'm angry at God for taking my life because I'm dying of cancer like Dr. Friedland was. The reality was, he was like, I have decided that the rest of my life will be the best of my life. It's just going to be a shorter life than I would have liked. But cancer is happening for me, not to me. And what he did was amazing. He went out in 11 months. He put out over 180 pieces of content, switching from coaching CEOs and entrepreneurs to teaching the world what it's like to go through the final stages of your life and teaching them what it's like to die, and folding in his kids, folding in his wife into a whole video series to teach people that, because he chose the mindset of cancer is happening for me, not to me.
That's priceless. I mean, that can be applied to anything. A red light to anything, to being 60 days out from being on the street.
Dude, 100%.
Everywhere.
Right. Think about it. It's like if I hadn't gone through that period, I wouldn't have hired my coach. I wouldn't have scaled the business. Wouldn't have made the Inc. list 6 times. From there, I wouldn't have enough money to go out and hire Dr. Friedland, which is, transformative for me. From there, I would have gone through the journey of self-discovery to figure out who I really wanted to be. I wouldn't have the wife I have now, because I would be a different man. Wouldn't have the child I have now. I'd be a different father. And wouldn't have written the book. Wouldn't become a bestseller. CEOs wouldn't read the book. It changes. I mean, so it all, truly the worst day of my life, September of 2006. Hey, you owe us money. If you don't give us your money, we're going to exercise your personal guarantee. You've pledged your house. We will take your house. From that one day, everything changed. Now, I'm not going to polish the stone. It sucked. It didn't feel good at the time, but in retrospect, you see these kind of branch point decisions. That was something that moved me forward to get, like you talk about, getting me unstuck over a period of years to get to the life I want to have, to be able to impact others who, again, read the book, who invite me to be on their shows, who allow me to coach them. None of that, literally none of that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have screwed up the company.
Tell us another, you shared this pivotal moment when you shifted. Tell us another story from somewhere in your life that kind of added some depth to this story that you're unfolding in front of us here today.
Oh, sure. So making the Inc. 5000, I'm thinking life was pretty good. During that process, I thought, why don't I feel better? Why don't I'm getting to the external. I didn't realize how big my internal emptiness was. And that emptiness was showing up in a lot of different parts of my life, including how I parented. So I currently have a 16-year-old daughter and I have a 35-year-old son. So I'm talking about my son in this story. And my son graduates high school, decides that I love my business more than I love him, and chooses not to speak to me for almost 3 years. That really sucked. And I was angry and I was hurt, and it was just him and I was a single dad. And I remember hiring Dr. Friedland, and I was very, very much like kind of lost. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with things, and thought about selling the business, and all these different thoughts were going on in my head. And he goes, well, what is the biggest problem in your life? I said, well, my son doesn't speak to me. He's like, that's the one thing we're going to work on. I'm like, awesome. Took out a pen, wrote down my son's phone number, gave it to Dr. Danny, said, call him. Clearly he's the problem. And just like you, he laughed, hands me the number back, and he goes, you're the problem. I'm like, no, I know. Like, I've done this. I went to parent-teacher conferences. I did all the sports events. I was present. I was there. It's evidence. Pat me on the back. Yeah. I did a great job. And he's like, right. He goes, you are the problem. So if you want to reconnect with your son, you change you, which I wasn't used to hearing, and it will change. And which it was for me, it was more of a almost a spiritual journey, as I had to change my energy. I had to change my perspective. I had to work through my resentment and my anger. And then once I did that, 9 months later, my son reconnected with me.
That's a beautiful thing.
Oh, it's transformative.
100%. And from that day to today, it's been what, some 20 odd years, 15 years?
So we basically reconnected in 2012, 2013, somewhere in that. Yeah. 2013. So it's been 13 years, 14 years, and he just bought his first company. He's a CPA, just bought his first practice, and he's given me the blessing of watching him grow and evolve. And he let me speak at his wedding. And it's he's not my best friend. Like we get together, except for eating tax season, we get together at least once a week.
Excellent. Share another story with us, Todd.
I'm sorry, could you say it again?
Share another story with us.
Another story. So when it comes to figuring out, what I wanted to do if I was going to sell the business, I kind of had a vision and a plan. I had the how figured out. I struggled to really double down on the why, because the why matters for me for everything. And so I started creating this model of doing these exercises to help me figure out my why. And I know it now. What I want, doing what I want, where I want, with whom I want, as often as I want, for a fee or for free. That's what I do. That's to improve lives. And when I was transitioning from diversified industrial staffing to coaching and writing and speaking, we were talking to Dr. Friedland, and I said, "What if nobody hires me? what if nobody reads my book? All these fear monsters I had going on in my head." And he says, "Well, you can't serve two masters." I said, "What do you mean?" Your passion and your energy and your joy comes from coaching people, from speaking, from being of service. Your income comes from being the CEO of diversified industrial staffing, but it drains your energy. You really have a lot of frustrations with the business, and it's not something that gives you joy. You can't serve two masters. I'm like, okay. We eventually reached a point where I tried to do both for a little while, and it got to the point where we did this thing called burn the ships. I sold the business, walked away, exited some relationships, moved fully into being fully present for what I wanted to do, and then, boom, COVID hit. I'd been booked to travel. I was going to be in 3 different countries on 6 different stages. I was launching. And he said to me, he goes, "How is COVID happening for you, not to you?" I said, "I don't see it, man. I just don't see it." In fact, so now I'm really, I've burned my ship. I'm stuck on the shore here. I can't go back. And we did an exercise where we looked at, if I hadn't sold the business, how much more money would it have cost me to keep it open during COVID when businesses were shut down? Like, interesting. Okay. Made sense. Felt a little better. And he said, "Do you need to go travel? Do you need to be on stage? Do you need to be face-to-face with people to make your impact? Do you need to go be face-to-face in person in San Diego, California, New York City, Montreal, wherever? Do you need to?" I said, "Well, no, I can make an impact from anywhere." He goes, "Great." He goes, "Find places to volunteer." Okay. I did this thing through EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, where I volunteered my time. I talked to, oh my gosh, how many was it? 42 CEOs over 67 days for free, because they had never been through a recession. They had never been through anything like COVID, and they were all freaking out. And I coached them for free, 1 hour per person. Got no clients from it, but boy, did I polish my message. That worked really well. And from there, that was my biggest army of salespeople to tell their buddies, their forum mates, and their community that, hey, this guy can possibly help you. And that's really, working from home launched that, because I chose to reframe COVID as it was happening for me, not to me. I can spend more time at home, but I can volunteer, I can reach out, and I can work. I literally spoke from here in Detroit in Japan. They brought me in to speak. I had to get up like midnight and talk to them because it was their morning. But I couldn't have done it. People in Japan couldn't afford to fly you there. So the reframing of the mind that it happens for me, not to me, has served me so many different times in so many different ways. I could tell you stories for hours.
That is fantastic. I think that's a great point to leave this at, right? This idea of who me versus for me. Being uncomfortable. We solved the secret. It was a great session, man. 20 minutes. We solved the secret of life. It's being uncomfortable. We end up in this conversation of to me versus for me. I don't know about you, but I'm an altered soul. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for the
And I'm
opportunity.
sure that I'm sure that our listeners also walked away with a few things in themselves today. So I appreciate that. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with in closing?
So I always, I haven't done any podcasts in a while. I got my next book coming out. It's called Traumapreneur, and usually, you do your promotions and the generosity of folks like you having on the stage. But I always say to this to people: it's like anybody who's feeling stuck and they feel like they've got nobody to talk to. I always, someone gives of their time to me to read my book, to read my blogs, to watch me on a show or listen to a show like yours, I always say, what can I do for you? So the give I always say is anybody who needs someone to talk to, a CEO, an entrepreneur, a leader who's struggling with being stuck, the itty bitty shitty committee mindset piece, whatever you're going through, I'm happy to chat with you for an hour for free. So just email me at todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. You get an hour on my calendar, no sales pitch, just because it gives me an opportunity to be of service to you, which feeds my why, and good things come from that.
And I think with that, we'll call it a wrap. I so sincerely appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us today, Todd.
Thank you, Abizer. Take care.
Thanks for listening to The Bigger Game. If you're ready to lead with intention and create the life you want, follow along at abuzerrashid.com and on social media at Abuzer Rashid Group. Until next time, keep playing bigger.